Hello, friends. I hope you're well. I hope that you're healthy. And I hope and I pray this last week you have felt the love and the embrace of God in your life in a real and tangible way. Today, I want to talk to you a bit about hope. The author of Hebrews puts it this way: faith is being assured of what we hope for, convicted of what is yet unseen. This passage originally was written to a group of Christians who lived, of all places, in Italy. The scholars speculate that it could have even been an early Christian community located within Rome. We don't know for sure, but what we do know is that this community was going through a time of suffering, and the message of Hebrews was basically to endure and not to give up on hope. Now, I realize much has changed since Hebrews was written, but the message of hope, it resonates. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to evolve and linger on, we find ourselves with mixed emotions. We find ourselves grieving, and yet curiously, we find ourselves becoming ever more clear of what we hope for. Think about it this way. We're grieving the fact that many people are sick, and so what do we hope for? We hope that they would become well. We're grieving the fact that many places within our society and country, many healthcare institutions are overwhelmed, and so what do we hope for? We hope that things would return to normal. We are grieving the loss of jobs, restaurants closing, people who are hurting. And what do we hope for? We hope that our economy would be healed. We are grieving as Christians the fact that we are not able to meet together like we typically do. And so what do we hope for? We hope for the day in which we can come back together and do ministry as we once did. Now, here's the good news in the midst of it. This hope, it's not unfounded. This hope that we long for, it's not in vain. And the place we find this hope that we're looking for is, of all places, the past. The best predictor of the future, friends, is looking to the past. And as we look to the past, what we discover is that this is not the first time that the human race has gone through a pandemic. For example, Spanish flu. The year 1918 is when it hit. It affected nearly 25% of the world's population. Another pandemic is in the 1300s. It's known as the bubonic plague. It ravaged Europe and affected 30% of the European population. Even before that, there was a plague in early Rome, early Christianity, known as the Cyprian plague. At its height, 5,000 people lost their lives a day. Now, you might be thinking, Andy, this is an odd way to talk about hope, and I get that. But here's the hope we find as we look to the past. We've been through it before, and we made it. But here's the thing. It wasn't easy. Now, every fabric of my being wants to just say that this is just going to go away and everything's going to be fine. But the truth is, leaders, they lead, yes, but they also tell the truth. And the truth is, friends, getting through this is not going to be easy, but we will get through it. Take, for example, again, Spanish flu. It took 2 years for the world to get through that. Bubonic plague. It took 3 years for Europe to get through that. And even then, for the next century, it flared up again and again and again across the world. Or the Cyprian plague. It took the Romans and the early Christians nearly 20 years to get through it. But they got through it. And we find in this a sense of hope, but also a realism about what it is we are facing. The story that comes to my mind is something a pastor said to me years ago. It was nearly 10 years ago that I was a pastor in Tell City, Indiana. And as I was pastoring there, an old retired pastor began to attend our congregation. I can remember being so intimidated. I mean, pastors are not the easiest people to preach to. And this guy, his name was Alvin Wilson. He was the prototype of what you would expect out of a pastor. He was kind, he was gentle, he was convicted in what he believed in. And so as he began to worship with us, I looked forward to sitting down with him and learning from him. And finally the day came when I sat down with Alvin. I sat down with Alvin and I said, Alvin, tell me what I need to know as a young pastor, just getting started. I expected proverbial sayings to spring forth from him for like 30 minutes. But here's the thing, he smiled and he only uttered one thing. He looked at me and he said, Andy, be patient. Don't force things. Give God time to work. Now, I can't say I've always practiced what Alvin preached that day. But what I can say is in the moments I have, it's gone quite a bit better for me. And I can also say that I hope and I pray that we would practice what Alvin preached long ago to me in this current season we find ourselves in. This is not to say that we don't do anything at all. What we can do in the midst of this time of waiting for things to get better is practice the hope that we believe in until it becomes a reality. We practice what we desire and what we long for until we can implement it in a safe way. I think about many things when I talk about practicing hope these days. I think about the folks that are making masks for medical workers in hopes that one day we get through this. I think about the letters that children are making for the healthcare workers as a way to encourage them in hopes that we overcome this. I also think about things that we are doing as a congregation. This virtual video, this virtual sermon, and our virtual worship experience that we put forth every week is a way for us to practice hope. We send out a virtual worship experience every week in hope of the reality that one day we're going to be able to get together again and practice all these things like we once did. Another place we're practicing hope as a congregation is our young families. They're taking Facebook videos of themselves reading books, and we're able to show them to our children as a way to look forward to the moment in which we can get together and read books together again. My hope and my prayer this week, friends, is this: that we could practice what Alan preaches both today and days ahead. We would be patient, not force things, give God time to work, and practice our hope in safe ways in which we don't do harm to ourselves or other people. In the week ahead, stay tuned for our midweek podcast in which Pastor Jillian and I are going to talk about miracles. Also stay tuned for our upcoming worship experience that we'll be posting this coming weekend. The theme is going to be We Will Give. In closing, I'm going to leave you with one last image, an image of hope. One last thing that our community at Methodist Temple have been doing this last week is painting the sign of the cross on some of our windows. This is the central symbol of hope for us as Christians. As I've seen pictures of the crosses that our folks have painted, what I've been reminded of, and what I hope other people have been reminded of, is this: that our hope as Christians is this, that the many crucifixions we go through all end in resurrections, and that the pain we find ourselves in, it will not find or have the final word. God bless. Amen.